The Creighton Bluejays could not keep South Dakota off the offensive glass, so how in the heck are they going to stop Gonzaga?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the FanDuel app. So download FanDuel today. Well, folks, Gonzaga hosts Creighton tonight, Tuesday, November 11th in Spokane. We're going to meet this Blue Jays team, new look roster for Coach Greg McDermott. We're going to discuss our 5 keys to a Gonzaga victory. What do they need to do to make sure they are 3-0 to begin the 2025-26 campaign? And then we're also going to talk about the AP poll. Gonzaga moving up a few spots, maybe not as much as they should have. We'll talk about that as well, as the Lady Zags getting off to a 2-0 start on the season with a pair of road wins over the weekend. All of that, jam-packed episode today, but we start by talking about this game tonight between Gonzaga and Creighton. Again, for those of you listening on Tuesday, November 11th, the game will be at 7 p.m. Pacific time, and it will be at the McCarthy Athletic Center. I almost said the Spokane Arena. That's where Gonzaga played Oklahoma, but this is in the big house. This is in Gonzaga's home. It is very rare and should be celebrated immensely when Gonzaga is able to get this caliber of opponent who is willing to play them at the kennel. It is rare. It is difficult, and we have seen it here. Greg McDermott, big shout out to him. Big shout out to Creighton. I suspect Gonzaga would have played this game at the Spokane Arena and still been willing to play the return game at Creighton's home court. But for Creighton to say, no, we're good. We will come play you at your house, your 6,000 seat arena, which John Calipari is terrified of. It's great to see that Creighton is willing to play this game here. It's going to be on ESPN. Not ESPN2, not ESPN Plus, real good old-fashioned ESPN with our good friends Dave Fleming and Sean Farnham on the call. Should be an absolute blast tonight. The Zags 3-0 against Creighton in the Mark Few era. All 3 of those matchups have come since the 2017 season. It was a home-and-home series in 2017-18 and 2018-19. Gonzaga won both those games. Zach Norvell, now an assistant coach for Gonzaga, was tremendous in both of those games, a huge catalyst for Gonzaga getting those 2 W's. Gonzaga also played Creighton in the 2021 NCAA tournament, a win in that game. Of course, they also beat Oklahoma in that same NCAA tournament, so certainly a bit serendipitous to see Gonzaga play those 2 teams back-to-back when they played them back-to-back in that tournament run as well. Of course, Gonzaga went all the way to the national championship that year, which also included a game against UCLA, who Gonzaga will play later this year. So again, great to see Gonzaga play in this series against Creighton again. And in addition to having played this team before and having a lot of kind of history in terms of tremendous basketball success for both programs, these 2 teams have also shared a pair of really great players in their history. Back about more than a decade ago, it was probably about 15 years ago, Grant Gibbs played his freshman year at Gonzaga, an Omaha native. He ended up getting a little homesick after his first year in Spokane, ended up going back, playing for Creighton, was a really good player for the Blue Jays, the point guard for Doug McDermott, of course, Greg McDermott's son, who really kind of helped put Creighton back on the map as a team that had just kind of gotten into the Big East. So very cool to see Gibbs be a part of that history after starting his career at Gonzaga. And then, of course, the other one would be Ryan Nembhard. Ryan Nembhard spent the first 2 years of his career at Creighton before transferring to Gonzaga, following the footsteps of his older brother, Andrew Nembhard, who did not start at Creighton. He started at Florida, but then spent 2 years at Florida before spending 2 years at Gonzaga. So for the Zags, it was nice to be able to now get this series back on track. I think these are 2 teams that should be playing each other pretty regularly. It would be nice to see this be a home-and-home series that is kind of routinely in the cycle for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They're fun teams. Greg McDermott's one of the best coaches in college basketball, period. And so getting a chance to square off against this team after having just played a good team and a good coach in Porter Moser and the Oklahoma Sooners, really fun early season test for the Zags. The Blue Jays 1-0 on the year. They've only played 1 game. It was on Wednesday. They were the last top 25 team to debut this season, and they won, and they scored 92 points but it wasn't exactly the prettiest game for the Blue Jays. They were playing South Dakota, the Coyotes, who are outside the top 300 at KenPom. They won 92-76. They were favored by 29.5 points, so I don't think you feel great about a 16-point victory. Basically, not only did they not cover the spread, they were barely halfway to even covering the spread. A big part of their challenges in this game, a kind of listless second half. I think they only outscored the Coyotes by 3 in the second half, but they gave up 21 offensive rebounds. 21 offensive rebounds to a mediocre to honestly bad mid-major team. And Greg McDermott was fired up. He was fired up after the game, and he specifically mentioned Gonzaga in his post-game press conference. He said, we need to hook it up Sunday and Monday as we get ready for Gonzaga because we're not tough enough yet. We're not physical enough yet, and we don't need to do it because I'm mad and I'm upset. We need to do it because it's the only way we're going to reach our potential. Certainly, if you're Gonzaga, you're licking your chops a little bit at the idea that Creighton was unable to gobble up or to prevent South Dakota from gobbling up offensive rebounds when Gonzaga themselves were excellent on the offensive glass against Oklahoma. We will talk more about that in the second segment of the show. More on Creighton, though. Owen Freeman, transfer from Iowa, if you recall. He was a player pursued heavily by Gonzaga very early in the transfer portal process. I think at the time, Gonzaga was unsure if they were going to retain both Graham Ike and Braden Huff. Freeman was really one of the only bigs that Gonzaga actually pursued in the transfer portal. I think after that is when they felt confident enough in being able to secure both Ike and Huff that they said, well, we're good. We don't need to go after any more bigs. We're going to focus on adding some wings, adding some shooting, and of course landed Adam Miller and Tyon Grant-Foster to do exactly that. Freeman ends up at Creighton, and he was really good in their first game. He came off the bench, which I don't think is going to happen tonight. He is very likely going to be in the starting lineup. He came off the bench because he was dealing with an injury that ended his Iowa season prematurely and really kind of persisted throughout the offseason for Freeman. He played 19 minutes, and Coach McDermott said that was kind of the range they wanted him at. So I wouldn't expect him to play much more than 25 or 30 minutes. I don't think he gets to 30 minutes against Gonzaga. And so the fact that he's maybe not going to be, I think he's going to be at full health, but not in kind of the kind of game shape that he would need to be in to play a full game. Certainly a bit of an advantage for Gonzaga, as he is arguably their best player and certainly their best player in the front court. He had 19 points in that opener again in just 19 minutes, but Creighton also shot just 31% from 3, 8 of 26. As of right now, KenPom has Creighton 43rd in the country. They are 25th in adjusted offensive efficiency, and I bet that will climb as the year goes on. Greg McDermott's teams are pretty routinely in the top 20, top 15 even for adjusted offensive efficiency. However, right now, Creighton's adjusted defensive efficiency is way down at 88th, so certainly an area that they need to improve and that Gonzaga can take advantage of. Tempo-wise, Creighton is at 214, so kind of middle of the pack, a little below the middle of the pack in terms of their average tempo and pace while on the floor. Lots of new faces for Creighton. Most notably, they do not have Ryan Kalkbrenner. Ryan Kalkbrenner was one of the most prolific shot blockers in the history of college basketball. He spent 5 years at Creighton in the Big East and was a 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year in a conference that is known for being tough and physical and having great defensive players. 2 national championship victories by the Yukon Huskies, and yet Ryan Kalkbrenner was the Defensive Player of the Year every single year for the past 4 seasons. He's now off on the Charlotte Hornets, and he is doing great in the NBA. Shouldn't be a surprise to those who watched him in college. So this is a huge, massive, literally and figuratively loss for Greg McDermott and the Blue Jays. And again, Owen Freeman's good. He's a good player. He's even a decent defensive player, had good block numbers while at Iowa, but he is not that guy. And that's not a knock on Freeman as much as it's a testament to how truly excellent Ryan Kalkbrenner is and was. But also for Freeman, again, he's maybe not at his full strength and not in that kind of game shape that he needs to be. So this is a huge question mark for Creighton, is where does that production come from? Are they able to replace Kalkbrenner in the aggregate? And is Owen Freeman going to be able to do that? Because this is one of, if not the very best front court that Creighton is going to face all season long. The Blue Jays also had to replenish a lot of talent in the backcourt, and they did it via the transfer portal, and they added some high scoring dudes out of the transfer portal. Nick Graves comes over from Charlotte. He had 15 points in their first game. He averaged 17.5 points per game last year. Blake Harper comes over from Howard. He had only 7 points in their first game, but he averaged 19.5 points last year. Again, Howard not at a super high competitive level, but anybody who averaged 19.5 points at the Division I level is a scary good scorer. They also have Josh Dix. Josh Dix joined Owen Freeman and coming over from Iowa. He had 11 points in their first game, averaged 14.5 points last year. So the lowest points per game average from last year, but Dix averaged 14.5 points at Iowa in the Big Ten. So certainly a very high level scorer. Well, folks, rebounding, ball pressure, and setting the tempo. Those are three among our many keys for Gonzaga to get a victory on Tuesday night. Start the season 3-0. We're going to talk about those and a few others coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college basketball is back. I could not be more excited. The madness, the rivalries, the energy out in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. There's endless queues, there's hidden fees, there's prices jumping at checkout. And that's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices without any of those surprise fees. What you see, folks, that's what you pay. And I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, you can see amazing deals. And it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's honestly much less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. And if you haven't gotten your tickets yet for UCLA, the battle in Seattle on December 13th, you can get tickets right now on Game Time for just $97 a piece, and they have a super deal. Section 22, row F. You're just like a few rows up from the actual floor, and you get tickets in that section for $188. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And for those of you on YouTube, still recording here at the Creme 2 studio in Spokane, Washington. They were nice enough to throw the Locked On Zags logo on behind me for those of you watching. Very cool and very excited to be here. We're going to take a look at our 5 keys to victory for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs taking on the Creighton Bluejays on Tuesday night in Spokane. We already kind of introduced Creighton, talked a little bit about this roster. The number one key for Gonzaga in this one, pretty obvious from that first segment. Gonzaga's got to dominate in the glass, and Gonzaga's got to dominate on second chance points, because Creighton, this was a huge, massive area of concern for the Blue Jays in their first game. 21 offensive rebounds to South Dakota. The Coyotes, no disrespect to them, but they're like 300th in KenPom, something around there. Their defense was 338th. This is not a good or big team, and not a team that should be grabbing 21 offensive. Again, Gonzaga on Saturday against Oklahoma had 18 offensive rebounds. And it felt like Gonzaga dominated on the offensive glass. It felt like every time a shot went up for the Zags, they were in position to get that offensive rebound and create a second chance opportunity. For Creighton to give up more than that many offensive rebounds against an inferior mid-major opponent is a alarmingly concerning thing for the Blue Jays. I am sure they will tighten it up, but I don't know that there's a team in college basketball I would want to see on my schedule less, knowing that that's one of my team's biggest weaknesses, than this Gonzaga roster. Not only with Graham Ike and Braden Huff, of course, 2 6'10" guys who are, at least in Ike's case, known as great rebounders. Huff, it's a developing part of his game, but also with Tyon Grant-Foster's elite rebounding, with Jalen Worley being just a complete and utter menace on the offensive glass in this most recent game against Oklahoma. Gonzaga is a very, very good rebounding team in totality and was excellent in that game on the glass. If you're Creighton, this is the most important thing. You have to limit Gonzaga's second chance opportunities. Gonzaga's a tough enough team to beat regardless. They're really tough to beat at home, and they're basically impossible to beat if you are giving them routine amounts of second chance opportunities. Number 2 for Gonzaga, set the tempo. And this is a common theme, a common key that we talk about when Gonzaga is playing teams that like to play at different paces than them. A lot of teams like to play it slower. Not every team plays like St. Mary's does, where they're playing at one of the slowest paces in college basketball, taking 20 plus seconds per shot and really trying to slow you down and make you play at their pace. But Creighton is a team that historically hasn't played all that fast. They don't love to get out in transition. They don't love to run. They like to slow it down. And what I think we'll see Coach McDermott and the Blue Jays do is try to make Gonzaga adjust to their pace. Most of the teams that Gonzaga plays that are well coached will do this. This is a common strategy against the Zags. And it's what it does is it makes Creighton less likely to get a lot of their own offensive rebounds. I don't think Creighton's going to get as many second chance opportunities in this game, because what I suspect is going to happen is when they shoot the rock, they're going to fly back on defense, because if they crash the offensive glass and don't get it, Gonzaga is going to have opportunities to get out and run. And what we know about this Gonzaga team is if there is a chance that they can get out in transition and get an advantage, they're going to take it. So I think Creighton's going to accept that a lot of their possessions are going to be one and done, and they're going to fly back on defense and really stop or attempt to stop Gonzaga from getting out in transition. What I want to see from Gonzaga is pushing the pace as much as they can, but also like not letting Creighton dictate it, not letting Creighton say, hey, we're going to play slow. And so Gonzaga says, okay, well, we are going to have to adjust to that and also play slow. No, you play your pace. And for Gonzaga, typically that's something that they're able to do, is they're able to kind of flip that switch and make the other team adjust to them. But this Gonzaga team in particular, they want to play fast. They've made it very clear they want to play fast, but they have guards who haven't been in the system for very long and who are adjusting to that new speed change. Mario St-Superi's talked about this a handful of times of, adjusting to how fast Gonzaga wants to play and wanting to still play within control, but also, and Mark Few talked about this after the game on Saturday, like we're trying to find that balance, find that line between wanting to encourage Mario to be creative and be himself and play his style of basketball, knowing that that may lead to more turnovers. And there's a balance there. We're okay with you pushing the tempo and getting out in transition. And occasionally that may mean that you're a little out of control, or that you make a dumb turnover, or you try to force a pass that's not there. And again, where's that balance? And I think for Gonzaga, while Mario played great against Oklahoma, they're still very much trying to find that balance. And they're trying to find that balance with Braden Smith as well, who's a little bit more in control, but certainly not as flashy or quite as dynamic as Mario. So I think for Gonzaga, being able to set the pace and force Creighton to adjust to their speed is a huge key in this game. And they also need to do it while understanding the personnel and the limited experience that these 2 point guards have in the system. Key number 3 for Gonzaga, ball pressure. Ball pressure. Creighton's guards are good. They are very talented. They are very high scorers. They don't have a ton of like pure point guards. Their last pure point guard, if we're being honest, was Ryan Nembhard. When he left, they had Stephen Ashworth. Stephen Ashworth, great player, a transfer from Utah State, but he was more of a kind of a 2-guard who masqueraded as the point guard for Creighton. And this year's roster, the guys they brought in, Dix and Harper, who was their 3rd guard that they brought in, Dix, Harper, and Graves. All 3 of those guys. Graves is more of the point guard. He had 5 assists in their first game, but for those guys, they're not really pure point guards. And I think for Gonzaga, putting a ton of pressure on the ball. We saw them do this against Oklahoma. We saw them do this against an Oklahoma team that had experienced guards and like point guards. Like Nigel Pack is a point guard. He's very, very clearly a point guard. Even Xavier Brown is more of a point guard than I think some of these guards at Creighton. If I'm Gonzaga, I'm putting pressure on these guards as soon as they cross half court. I'm doing a lot of half court traps. I'm putting my length on those guys. I'm putting Emmanuel Nicente out there a bunch, Jalen Worley out there on the wing like we saw him do against Oklahoma, where Worley was guarding Xavier Brown. Not out of switch. He was just straight up guarding him, even though Worley was playing the 4 and Brown was playing the 2. I think we're going to see Gonzaga do that a lot in this game and really force Creighton to pass the ball early, to not be able to get comfortable and set in their half-court offense. And putting a ton of pressure on them could lead, if Creighton's able to break it, it could lead to them getting some easy buckets and maybe Gonzaga backs off. But I want to see them try it. I think one of the great things about Gonzaga having the amount of depth that they do on this roster is that they can afford to do this. They can afford to pick up fouls. They can afford to be relentlessly tough on defense and gassed. Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman and Gonzaga's guards of the last couple of years couldn't really do that. That wasn't really their style. That's part of it. But also, there just wasn't enough depth. Like Nembhard picking up a couple of fouls was catastrophic for Gonzaga because they did not have backup point guards on that team. This year, you can afford to do that. Inexperienced can pick up a couple early fouls because Worley and Tyon Grant-Foster are great defenders. Mario can pick up a couple fouls because you have Braden Smith. Like, you have the opportunity to be more physical, more aggressive defensively because of the depth on this roster. And I want to see Gonzaga take advantage of that against a Creighton team that has not played very many minutes together so far this season. Key number 4 for Gonzaga, you got to find that outside shot. The Zags are shooting under 30% from three through the first 2 games of the season. They're 13 of 44, good for 29.5%. Creighton can really score. And Creighton can not only really score, but they're going to play a slower pace. In a game that will have less possessions than the Gonzaga game against Oklahoma, and in a game against a team that is top 25 offensively, you need to be able to hit your outside shots. A bad shooting night for Gonzaga could be a problem. Now, if they're gobbling up offensive rebounds and getting all those second chance points, it may not end up being that big of a problem for Gonzaga, but you don't want to put that up to chance. You want to knock down those outside shots. Creighton's defense is not great. It's just not that great. And they're going to be really focused on EK and Huff. Every team that Gonzaga plays this year is going to be hyper-focused on how do we stop Graham and Braden down low? Do we double? When do we send that double team? Do we let them go in single coverage? Whatever it may be. And we've seen Gonzaga's guards and wings be really good at capitalizing on that. And we've seen Gonzaga's bigs be great at passing out of double teams, finding cutters, finding open shooters. For Gonzaga, they're going to get open looks. Adam Miller's going to get open looks. Steele Venture's going to get open looks. Emmanuel Nicente, Braden Smith, Mario Saint-Superi, everybody's going to get open looks. They need to knock them down. They don't need to shoot 40% in this game necessarily, but they need to shoot, I think they need to shoot better than 30% if they want to make sure that they're comfortably getting a W here out of the kennel. And number 5, we haven't talked about him yet. You got to let Tyon cook. I know it was a key in the last game, but you know what? It's a key for a reason. Tyon Grant-Foster was amazing against Oklahoma. He's now through 2 games averaging 14.5 points, 6 rebounds. He's shooting 61% from the field. He has been excellent on both ends of the floor. As he's still learning and adjusting and acclimating to Gonzaga's system, he has played tremendous already. He is a matchup nightmare for 90% of the teams in college basketball, including Creighton. Creighton has some good defensive players on this team, but do they have somebody with the length, the versatility, the physicality, the experience to fully be able to defend Tyon Grant-Foster? I do not think that they do. And I think Tyon Grant-Foster needs to just be unleashed. Let him go. Let him get out in transition. Let him relentlessly attack the rim and put pressure on those bigs. If you can get Owen Freeman in foul trouble, if you can get Isaac Trout in foul trouble, if you can get those other bigs for this team in foul trouble, the depth behind them, it's not really there. Karam Conan's their third string big, I think, 4th string big. He's never played a college basketball game. Similar to how Oklahoma's backup big, Kai Rogers was in his first game, and Graham Ike just scored on him very easily in the 6 minutes that he played. If Tyon Grant-Foster can get to the rim, can put pressure on them, can play high-level defense, that makes all the difference in the world in this basketball game for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Well, the Zags climbed 2 spots inside the top 20 of the AP poll. They probably should have climbed a little bit higher. We're going to talk about that as well as a 2-0 start to the season for the women's basketball team. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college basketball and the NBA are back, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you miss the start of a game or if you just want to ride out the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to those 4th quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Gonzaga opens as 9.5-point favorites against Creighton on Tuesday night in Spokane. They are minus 580 on the money line, heavy favorites to win this basketball game. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So folks, head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, closing out the show, talking about Gonzaga's slow climb in the AP top 25. For those who don't recall, Gonzaga opened up the season number 21 in the AP rankings. Felt a little bit low, but at the time when that poll came out, we didn't really know the status for Tyon Grant-Foster. And of course, this Gonzaga roster had a lot of new faces, only 4 returners who were really rotation pieces last year, really only 3 between Graham Ike, Braden Huff, and Emmanuel Nicente. So I could understand a little bit of trepidation around the Zags, and I didn't feel like 21 was particularly egregious. I believe I had them 17th in my rankings for the Locked On College Basketball podcast. So again, 21 felt kind of within the range of where they should be. But Tyon Grant-Foster is eligible and healthy and playing better basketball at the start of the season than I think most people thought that he was going to. And sure, Texas Southern is not an opponent that really should move the needle all that much in terms of AP voting, even though Gonzaga beat them by 55 points. But Oklahoma picked up a couple votes in the AP poll. Oklahoma was a 9 seed last year in the NCAA tournament. And yes, Gonzaga was playing in Spokane. And yes, the end result was only a 15-point win, but this team was up by 19 at halftime. They were up 20 most of the second half. And what they did to that team and how good Grant-Foster looks and how talented and deep and experienced this roster is, this is not the 19th best team in the country. But the AP voters only moved Gonzaga up 2 spots. And it's not surprising. AP voters tend to reward teams that win and move teams down that lose without thinking about it a whole lot more. There were teams that were behind Gonzaga in the AP top 25 who picked up better wins than Gonzaga did against Oklahoma. And that's not debatable. It's not debatable. North Carolina was 25th. They beat Kansas. Michigan State was 22nd. They beat Arkansas. Arkansas was ranked, both those teams were ranked higher than those teams. North Carolina and Michigan State both deserved to jump and to jump a lot. And they did. North Carolina moved up 8 spots. Michigan State moved up 5 spots. But I think Gonzaga A should have started higher and should have moved up more as well. I think Gonzaga is probably around 15. I think I would make an argument for them as high as like 12, maybe even kind of knocking on the door of the top 10. But they should have. I understand why them starting at 21 and climbing all the way to like 15 or 14 or 12 or something was probably not going to happen with a win over Oklahoma. But that doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean the AP voters nailed it in this case. I think they're still too slow to adjust and slow to develop for Gonzaga. And I think we will see them steadily climb more and more and more, although a game against Alabama on November 24th could set them back. Well, I'm not saying Gonzaga is going to lose that game, but that is going to be a tough one. For those who didn't see this, Alabama hung 103 points on St. John's at the Madison Square Garden, a road game for the Crimson Tide. First time Rick Pitino's given up 100 points in an extremely long time. This Alabama team is going to be very, very good. They moved from 15th all the way up to number 8. And so that's going to be a very tough test for Gonzaga. But as we've seen so often in Mark Few's history, Gonzaga is being much more favored by the computers than by the AP voters. 19th in the AP poll, Evan Miyakawa's website has Gonzaga 7th. Ken Pom has Gonzaga 8th. By the way, their adjusted offensive efficiency is also 8th, and their adjusted defensive efficiency is 10th. Bart Torvik, a little bit lower on Gonzaga, but still has them 14th. So again, the AP voters just not quite at the same spot as Gonzaga or as the computers are with regards to Gonzaga. Again, we already talked about Alabama being a top 10 team that Gonzaga will face November 24th in Las Vegas as the part of the Players Era Festival, the first game for Gonzaga in the Players Era Festival. Gonzaga is also playing another top 10 team in Kentucky. Mark Pope and the Wildcats are at number 9. They began the season at number 9 and did not move after winning their first games. This is a game that will be on December 5th. For Gonzaga in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena. And then Creighton, of course, number 23. They started at number 23. They stayed at number 23, did not drop, did not advance after their not incredibly comfortable win over South Dakota on Wednesday. Gonzaga is also playing Oregon, who received 43 votes in the AP poll. Oregon is ostensibly 29th as being the fourth team among vote getters that did not make the top 25. They lost a lot of votes. I think there are 87 votes in the preseason AP poll, so they lost quite a few votes. And understandably, Oregon barely beat Hawaii in their first game of the season, like really, really nearly lost that game. They needed a lay-in with 2 seconds to go by TK Simpkins in order to not lose that basketball game. And then they played Rice, and I think they only beat Rice by a possession as well. So 2 one-possession games against mediocre mid-level teams. Like Hawaii's fine, Rice is fine. It's not like those are bad. They're not the same as teams that Gonzaga plays early in the season like Texas Southern or other SWAC teams, but they're also not teams that you should be only beating by a possession. And yes, Oregon did not have Jackson Shellstead in the first game, but they did have him in the second game, and they still barely beat Rice in the American Conference. So they're at 29th. And then Oklahoma received 1 vote in the AP poll in the preseason. St. Mary's received 2 votes in the preseason AP poll. Neither of those teams received any votes this time around. Oklahoma, obviously understandable. St. Mary's, kind of surprised they lost their 2 votes, but 2 votes is basically a rounding error in the AP poll. If they keep playing well, they will get back into the AP conversation at some point. Boise State had picked up 4 preseason AP poll votes as well. Obviously, those are gone after they lost to a Division II team, Hawaii Pacific, in their first game of the season. All right, folks, quickly closing out the show. Zags 2-0, the women's basketball team with road victories over North Dakota State and Toledo. Zags started the season at North Dakota State, won 81-66. Allie Turner, 18 points, 4 of 5 shooting from 3. Lauren Whitaker in her Gonzaga debut after redshirting for the last year and a half. She had 13 points, 9 rebounds, shot 4 of 6 from the field. Gonzaga then went out to Toledo, Ohio to take on the Rockets. Won that game 72-69. Needed a late push from Allie Turner to get that W. She finished with 16 points, 5 assists, 4 of 5 from the field, including 2 of 3 from 3. And then Lauren Whitaker also great in that game, 16 points, 6 boards, 5 of 6 from the field, a perfect 6 of 6 from the charity stripe. No surprise that when the WCC awards came out, Allie Turner was your WCC Player of the Week, while Lauren Whitaker was your WCC Freshman of the Week. Gonzaga's next game will be on Thursday, November 13th. It'll be their first home game of the season, taking on the Rams of Colorado State, a future Pac-12 opponent. Colorado State's 2-0 on the year. They beat Weber State in their first game of the year and then obliterated Long Beach State in their second game. 73-34 was the final score in that one. Should be fun to see how Gonzaga stacks up with this Colorado State team on Thursday. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. We'll be back with a post-game show Wednesday morning after this game against Creighton. And then, of course, we'll be getting you ready for that Friday night game for Gonzaga on the road in Tempe against the Sun Devils of Arizona State. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And, of course, as always, go Zags.